If there is strain in your prayer, if there is panic in your voice, bargaining in your heart, and a hurried multiplication of words, you are not praying. You are pleading. Excuse me, I know that sounds sharp, but let us be honest with ourselves, you and me. Pleading is the sign that we are addressing a God somewhere else, trying to reach a power that is not here. That is the hidden premise beneath begging. God is absent. Good is missing. I must persuade Spirit to come to my situation and fix what has gone wrong. And if you read through the eyes of the world, that premise seems reasonable. But it is precisely that premise which sustains the very condition we would be rid of. We keep our own dream alive by announcing again and again that the dream is outside the presence. You know this cycle. A problem presents itself, and at once fear rises like a tide. Words hurry to the mouth, anxiety to the mind. We repeat declarations, we promise reforms. We count the beads of phrases as if heaven could be bribed by syllables. The storm of thinking grows louder. When it quiets for a moment, we call it an answer. But what do we find there? Either disappointment, because nothing on the outside has changed, or, at best, a temporary lessening of symptoms without the true companion of all spiritual grace, inner peace. And then the next gust comes, and we are at it again. Now hear this with the ear of the heart. The prayer that works is not the prayer that talks most. It is the prayer that yields most. It yields the central assumption that God is elsewhere. It yields the imagined distance between the seeker and the sought. It yields the claim that there is a self here who must persuade a reluctant deity to do what love does not already do. Stand ye still. Yes, we will come to that. But first, stand still from this inner argument that would make a God of our fear and a stranger of our source. Do not think that I am rebuking words themselves. I am not. But let us not be satisfied with words that spring from anxiety. The letter, without realization, becomes a cloak for fear. The aim of prayer is not to get God to do something. The aim is to stop announcing God's absence and begin recognizing presence where we are. Presence, here. Good, here. The life that knows its way, here. When this becomes even a glimmer, you will notice that the breath slows, the pulse weakens its drum, and the mind's winds begin to settle. That, already, is prayer. So let us diagnose the thing plainly. Begging is evidence of a false God, the God we keep at a distance and then chase. The living God is not a goal, but a givenness, not an object to be fetched, but a presence to be recognized. And the more we yield to that recognition, the more the storm we thought out there is found to be a disturbance of belief in here, ready to dissolve as we cease proclaiming separation. We are not summoning the sun. We are ceasing to praise the cloud. Now, if that much is clear, let us face the next subtlety. Because here is where many of us, you and me, lose our way while thinking we are on it. We outline. We make a schedule for God. We say, this must happen by next Thursday in such and such a manner. And then we label that prayer. Excuse me, but that is not prayer. That is management. That is the personal self standing in the middle, clipboard in hand, telling infinity how to be infinite. Do not make the mistake ever of being satisfied with a statement of truth or with an itinerary of truth. The letter of truth cannot substitute for realization. Words are not the enemy. Fear uses words as its mask. You can recite the truest sentences ever spoken and still miss the life of them if they remain up in the region of the head. Truth recited is not prayer. Prayer is truth realized as consciousness. Realization is not a syllable. Realization is a dawning, a quieting, a warmth that rises not from argument, but from awareness. It is that shift in which, down in the region of the heart, there steals in a conviction that presence is here, that love is the very fabric of this moment, that the life within you is the life itself living you. There, and only there, does a word become flesh. Frantic repetition can never do this. Why? Because frantic repetition hammers 2 nails deeper every time we strike it. First, it nails the problem to a cross of reality in our own belief. We keep lifting it up and looking at it. Second, it nails us to the role of doer, the one who must make something happen by force of mental motion. Those are 2 forms of bondage, the reality of the claim and the reality of the claimer. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. There is not compulsion, not strain, not the clang of 1,000 inner petitions. The more breathless the recital, the more distant the heart feels from peace. And that distance is the measurement that tells you, this is not yet prayer. So do not be satisfied with words. Use a word as you would use a key to open and then to enter. Say the truth, yes, but then be still long enough for it to say you. Read, declare, whisper if you must, and then yield. Yield the plan. Yield the clock. Yield the image of a self accomplishing. Let the sentence fall like seed into silence, and do not dig it up to see if it is working. When words begin to fail you, not from defeat, but because the inward ear has turned away from noise, you are not losing prayer, you are finding it. True prayer begins precisely there, where leverage ends and recognition begins. There, in the quiet, is where the storm forgets its name, and you discover that what you were seeking with your mouth had already found you in your heart. Stand ye still, yes, but first, be still from the urge to speak God into being, and let God be God where you are. Now, if we are to let God be God where we are, we must be very clear what we mean by God here. Not a superperson sitting somewhere. Not a magnified human with moods to be sweetened and will to be bent. Excuse me, but as long as you and I aim our prayer at a someone out there, we will keep alive the very distance we seek to overcome. God, as God is infinite being, being itself, life itself, consciousness itself, ever present, ever active, omnipresent as presence. Not a person to be convinced, but the very substance of presence, the very isness of this instant. If you read through the eyes of the world, you will look for a body or a face to address. If you read with the inner ear, you will discern an impersonal, loving activity that constitutes your existence and mine. Let us say it plainly. The Christ isn't a man or a woman. The Christ is a divine state of consciousness. It was never confined to a cradle, never retired to a tomb, and never belonged to one century or one shore. Christ is the name we give to God made evident as awareness, the presence of God felt, known, recognized within experience. In some degree, it appears as you, in some degree as me. In fullness, we call it Christhood. But whether in a glimmer or in a great light, it is the same presence revealing itself, the same love announcing, I am here, and I am your life. This is the shift. We are not trying to pull God into our life. We are learning to discern the Father within, the presence already constituting our life. Hear the scriptural whisper. I can of mine own self do nothing. That is the end of personal doership, and in that very breath, the beginning of spiritual demonstration. The Father within me, He doeth the works. What is that Father? Not a relative deity, but the very indwelling presence that is the life of you, the mind of you, the power of you. When prayer rises to this recognition, it ceases to be negotiation and becomes communion. So when you enter the inner room, do not begin with, "Dear somebody, please come." Begin, if you must begin with words at all, with a recognition. Here. Here where I am, God is. Here the presence is the only presence, the activity the only activity, the life the only life. Then be still, not to summon, but to sense. Let consciousness turn upon itself and feel after the gentle, impersonal love that neither withholds nor bestows, but forever is. Prayer, then, is not an attempt to move a God. It is the willingness to be moved out of personal sense into impersonal awareness. Do you see how restful this becomes? The strain goes out because the center of action has shifted. No longer do I stand with clipboard and plan. No longer do I brace myself to do the work of spirit. I abide. I consent. I yield to the presence that is already at work, already fulfilling itself as harmony. This is the first inward turning, the doorway to sanctuary. From here, we will learn to watch the storm lose its borrowed power. But even now, in this reverent recognition, the winds begin to tire, because there is nothing left to fight, only presence to be known. Stand ye still, and let the impersonal Christ within announce its own peace. Now, if we will allow this recognition to deepen, let us look again at what we call our problems: sin, disease, lack, limitation. If you read through the eyes of the world, you will miss the great point. And the great point is this: these claims do not stand as powers. They present themselves as powers. They thunder at us as realities. But in truth, they are a storm, noise and motion in consciousness, arguing for their own importance and borrowing their force from our fear. The world declares, "Here is a fact," and then bids us bow to it. Spirit whispers, "Be still, and see what remains when fear ceases to testify." How do the eyes of the world read the day? They measure by appearances. They forecast by yesterday's weather. They gather evidence from charts and screens and balances and rumors and say, "This, then, is wisdom." Excuse me, but that is not wisdom. That is compilation. That is the mind gathering clouds and then worshiping the shadow it has collected. The more it collects, the darker it grows, and then it announces its own darkness as the truth. If you and I accept that mode of seeing, we stand outside the sanctuary, soaked by the rain we keep describing. It takes what is called the wise, illumined awareness, to discern what is spiritually present even when sense testimony shouts the opposite. Through the inner eye, one begins to feel, beneath the racket, a quiet that was not made quiet, but is quiet. Through the inner ear, one hears, under the wind, a still, small voice that never entered the gale and will not leave it. This is not pretense. This is not saying the sky is blue when the sky is black. This is recognizing that reality is not altered by the weather of belief. Now hear the practice, because it is simple and it is exact. When a storm rises, this pain, this fear, this lack, you do not stand in the field and argue with it. You do not take a stick to the wind. You retire, within. You enter the inner sanctuary. You wait it out, not as a person gritting teeth on a clock, but as a soul consenting to presence. The only effort that works is relaxing from effort. You close the door on the theater of appearances and sit in the silence of what is. Stand ye still, not to attract a distant God, but to cease broadcasting distance. What happens there? The foundation of the storm is exposed, a belief in separation, a faith in second powers, a trust in the testimony of fear. As fear subsides in the felt nearness, no, the felt here-ness of the presence, the storm loses its fuel. The images that claimed objectivity are found to be projections sustained by our attention. Withdraw the belief, and the picture fades. Recognize presence, and the claim finds nothing to cling to. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from the compulsion to fix, to fight, to prove. This liberty is the dissolving. The winds pass, the waves flatten, or the waves do not matter, which in principle is the same. Therefore, when the next gust begins to rattle the windows of thought, do not run to battle stations. Retire to the center. Whisper if you must, "Here God is," and then be quiet until the whisper dissolves into awareness. Wait, not for time to act, but for truth to announce itself as peace. This is how storms end for the wise, not by conquest, but by communion. Stand ye still, and behold that what threatened you had no life apart from your consent, and your consent now belongs to God. Now we come to the labor that is no labor, the work that undoes work. Stand ye still, not as a slogan to embroider, but as an instruction to be obeyed. The paradox is exact. The meeting of a problem is accomplished by the amount of effort that we can bring to relaxing from effort. Excuse me, yes, it sounds like a riddle, but it isn't. It is the difference between the personal will that thrashes in the water and the soul that lets the ocean be the ocean. It is not your thrashing that saves you. It is your ceasing to fight the buoyancy that has always been beneath you. Do not mistake this for passivity. Passivity says, whatever happens, happens, and falls asleep in resignation. Stillness is wide awake. Stillness is the most alert posture a soul can assume. It withdraws not from life, but from personal will, so that divine activity may be consciously recognized. The battle is not yours, but God's. That is not poetry. That is an operational law of consciousness. When I cease to contend as a separate self, I become transparent to the only power there is. Then what needed doing is found already done in principle, and the appearance yields to the presence that never left. Here is the way of it, simple and exact. First, stop the mental argument. Stop naming the storm and giving it lineage. Stop rehearsing outcomes, both the tragic and the triumphant. Stop demanding signs and timetables. Withdraw attention from the theater of the mind. Retire, within. Enter the inner sanctuary, a holy of holies at the center of your being, where you and I no longer name, blame, or plan. We abide. We let presence announce itself as peace. We say, if we must say anything at all, "Here, God is." And then we grow quiet enough to feel that here-ness as the only here. In that stillness, do not strain to hear messages. Do not poke at the silence to make it speak. The letter has carried you to the threshold. Let Spirit carry you in. Observe the breath slow. Observe the shoulders surrender their armor. Let the mind's wheel coast to a stop without your hand on the brake. If a fear rises, do not wrestle it. Turn again to presence. If a picture insists, do not polish it. Turn again to presence. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. From policing thoughts, from manufacturing faith, from proving anything to anyone. The liberty is the proof. The peace is the announcement. The quiet is the answer. Some of you will say, "But should I not do something?" Yes, do this. Do the one doing that undoes the doer. Stand ye still. Yield the scepter of personal control. Let the government be upon His shoulder. In this surrender, you will not find vacancy. You will discover activity. The Father within, He doeth the works. Doors open without knocking, or the need to go through those doors dissolves. A word is given to say, or the necessity of speech evaporates. Either way, harmony declares itself, not as reward for your struggle, but as revelation in your rest. And so, make of this a practice, not an episode. Several times a day, retire for a minute or two to the inner sanctuary. Stop the argument. Stop the rehearsal. Stop the demand. Recognize presence. Abide until the pressure in the chest unknots and the sense of "I must" yields to "God is." Then go about your affairs, not armed for battle, but clothed in quiet. The storm will test your door. Let it knock at an empty house. The one who answers there is the only one, and where that one is realized, the storm has no business to transact. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. Now we come to the holy juncture, where the letter bows and spirit enters. Where words, having served as usher, quietly take their seat, and realization stands. When words fail, prayer does not cease. Prayer begins. Wordless prayer is not blankness. It is not stupefaction. It is not a trance. Wordless prayer is awareness, felt, gentle, living. It is the recognition of presence, embraced as the only presence. It is trust, not in an outcome, but in the one who never became an outcome. It is the inner yes to the fact that God is here, that the Christ, this impersonal, universal love intelligence, is the life of you. In that yes, the voice grows still, because there is nothing left to persuade. There is only presence to behold. Why does this dissolve the claim? Because it removes the premise upon which the claim stands: separation. Every fear lives on the belief that you are apart from your source, and therefore must secure, control, and defend. In communion, the sense of apartness relaxes. The imagined distance collapses. The storm has no house to rattle when no one is home to fear. The picture that shouted for attention in your mind finds no audience and fades. You will not conquer the storm. You will outlast it in the atmosphere of the real. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. From second powers, from the compulsion to fix, from the hypnosis of appearances. In that liberty, the claim, this pain, this lack, this threat, has nowhere to rest. It cannot attach to realized oneness. There is a distinct transition point, and you will know it, not because a trumpet sounds, but because the drum ceases. The agitation stops recruiting your attention. The breath unknots itself. The shoulders forget to guard. The timeline you were forcing loosens its grip. This is not a pep talk. This is not, "I think I can, I think I can." This is a heart knowing that does not argue, a quiet assurance, a soft, steady warmth spreading through awareness. In that hour, sometimes in a minute, sometimes after a longer waiting, the government has shifted shoulders. The Father within, He doeth the works, and you bear witness. Some of you are afraid and say, "If I stop asking, nothing will happen." Excuse me, but asking from fear is the nothing. It is noise imitating prayer. It is a shadow making speeches to itself. Realization is the something, because realization is God recognized where you are. The battle is not yours, but God's, and God does not battle. Presence is presence. When asked from fear, the mind manufactures its own wind and then calls it weather. When resting in realization, peace announces itself, and the need that was shouting either dissolves or is found to have been a mirage of belief. If you need a handrail into this silence, take it softly. Be still. Let the storm pass. There is a presence. It is here. It is now. Be still. Let the mind's pictures come and go without your signature. There is a presence. It is here. It is now. Be still. Let the heart say yes without sentence. There is a presence. It is here. It is now. Wait, not on time, but on God. And when words try to return, let them return only as witnesses to what already is. Communion. Wordless prayer is not the absence of prayer. It is prayer fulfilled. The end of separation's story and the dawning of peace as your only testimony. Now, just here, another voice sometimes rises. Quietly, perhaps, but with authority borrowed from the world. And it says, "Be careful. If you let this Christ take the center, it will overturn your throne." Do you recognize that? The authorities of the senses always tremble when a greater authority draws near. The human mind fears loss of control. It fears that if it yields to stillness, its plans will be unseated, its cleverness dismissed, its importance forgotten. Excuse me, but hear me well. No one need fear the Christ. No one. The Christ is not a destructive force. The Christ is of a constructive nature. The Christ liberates. It does not punish. It reveals. It does not ravage. Its coming into conscious recognition does not steal your life. It restores to you the life that is your life. What then seems to be destroyed in its presence? Only that which never belonged to God. Fear, guilt, pride, self-condemnation, the belief in powers apart from the one power. Light does not destroy a room. Light dissolves darkness. Truth does not injure reality. Truth uncovers reality by removing the lie that hid it. So when the inward Christ is realized, the only wreckage you will find is a pile of discarded masks, old disguises of I-ness, old armors of defense, old charms of manipulation. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from second powers. Liberty from the exhausting necessity to run the universe from your little chair. But you say, if I stand still, will not something precious be taken from me? Yes, something will be taken. The ache of loneliness, the clang of anxiety, the tyranny of outcomes, the boast of the personal will. The yoke that is heavy will be lifted. The burden that bites the shoulder will be removed. And what arrives in its place? Peace. a new government upon his shoulder, a rhythm you do not manufacture, an order you do not police, a love you do not maintain. The battle is not yours, but God's, and God does not battle. Presence is presence. It acts by revealing that nothing unlike it has substance. Understand, then, why the ego dreads stillness. Stillness removes its stage. Stillness refuses to applaud its monologue. In quiet, the self-importance that strutted as savior finds no footlights and wanders off. But this is not your death. This is your birth. He that loses his life, his self-importance, his private agenda, his crown of separateness, finds life. Not a smaller, shrunken existence, but a larger one, more generous, more tranquil, more inevitable in its harmony. So take this to heart. You are not being threatened by God. You are being welcomed home to what is already true. The inner sanctuary is safe. The Christ is gentle. The only edges it cuts are the cords that bound you. If a tremor passes through you as you yield, let it pass. It is the wind leaving the door. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. Not destruction, but disclosure. Not a blow, but a blessing. Not a verdict against you, but the verdict for you, already written at the center of your being. You are mine. Come, rest. Be still. Let what never was fall away, and let what forever is, peace, become your only testimony. Now, if this presence is gentle, and its nature constructive, the next question must be faced, you and me. Who am I in relation to it? Excuse me, but this cannot remain an abstraction. If the Christ is a divine state of consciousness and not a figure to be chased, then prayer ripens into identity. The Christ isn't a man or woman. The Christ is a divine state of consciousness. And this is not reserved for the few. There is no one, hear me, no one in this room or anywhere on earth who has not in some measure shown forth the nature of the Christ. In every unpremeditated kindness, in every restraint of the sharp word, in every inner yes to goodness against the pull of self-interest, the Christ has already peeked through. You have known it. You have felt it. That is why you are here. Now let the lens turn from behavior to being. What is the self that prays? What is the life that lives you? There is a presence at the center of your being which lives your life for you. Not as a puppet master, not as a tyrant, but as the very life that is your life. The Father within, He doeth the works. I can of mine own self do nothing. That is not self-contempt, that is spiritual accuracy. The personal sense is not the origin of your light, your wisdom, your love. The radiance you admire in your best moments is borrowed from the sun that never sets at your center. Let us define, and in defining, let us enter. Spiritual consciousness is your awareness of God's presence, here, now, without interval. Spiritual consciousness is your awareness of God's government, the new government upon His shoulder that orders your steps without strain. Spiritual consciousness is your awareness of God as the only power, the end of second causes, the end of fearful bargaining. Spiritual consciousness is your awareness of God as your life, living you, thinking you, loving you as Himself. Spiritual consciousness is your awareness of God as the substance of harmony, appearing as safety, as supply, as right action, without your whip at its back. What then is the real bondage? It is the ingrained belief, I am a separate self managing my life. That creed is the birthplace of strain. It is the drumbeat of fear. From it springs the begging voice, because a self apart must plead with a God apart. And the more sincerely it begs, the more real it makes its own apartness. Excuse me, but that is why prayer seems to fail. The petitioner sustains the absence he laments. Now hear the invitation, and let it be gentle and exact. Humility is not self-belittlement. Humility is consent. Not my will, but thy will. Spoken not as a brave slogan, but felt as an inward fact. The will of God is not a rival to your joy. The will of God is your joy fulfilled. To say, thy will, is to allow the inner government to take its rightful place. It is to lay down the scepter of personal control and discover that you have not lost authority. You have found the authority that was always yours in God. This is the turning point. Not a separate self pleading, but the indwelling Christ recognized as the life of you. From this center, words grow few, because persuasion is over. From this center, fear loosens, because you are no longer homeless in your own being. From this center, prayer becomes communion, and communion becomes identity. I am that which bears witness to the one presence. Stand ye still in that. And the storm that depended on your separateness will find no footing where you are one. Now, if identity has begun to dawn, do not demand that it burn at noon every hour of the day. Grace has its rhythm. It is not a machine to be switched on by human will, and yet it does not come to the drowsy or the defiant. Here is the paradox you must cherish, because it saves you from despair. No one can receive it by their own efforts, and yet no one receives it without the labor of surrender and receptivity. Excuse me, but you cannot pry open heaven with affirmations, neither can you doze into it with neglect. Grace plays the music. You bring the silence that hears. Grace is the wine. You offer the emptied cup. The government is upon his shoulder. You and I lay down our private scepters so that shoulder may be consciously recognized. Therefore, do not condemn the ebb because you have known the flow. You will taste stillness today, lose it tomorrow, and find it again the next hour. This is not failure. This is education in consciousness. The sea does not mourn when the tide goes out. It knows it will return. The lamp may flicker, but the light does not. Each return is not a reset to zero. Each return carries more trust, less drama, more certitude that presence is presence, even when your senses report weather. Do not be satisfied with words, yes, but do not despise the small glimmers. Each glimmer is a credential signed by grace that says, keep coming, keep consenting, keep discovering that the one you seek is the one by which you seek. Now about waiting, because the impatient heart mistakes it for delay. Waiting is not postponement. Waiting is confidence. Wait on the Lord, not as a beggar at a locked door, but as one who abides in the recognition that the work of God is established before your asking. The meeting of a problem is accomplished by the effort we bring to relaxing from effort. We are not killing time. We are letting time die in the face of the eternal. We are not marking days on a calendar. We are marking our consent in the inner sanctuary where the Father within doeth the works. This too shall pass is not resignation. It is spiritual assurance that storms cannot survive in realized oneness. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, from hurry, from deadlines, from terror's clock. If you need courage, lift your eyes from the little map of your personal story to the wide horizon of our humanity. The world today, for all its noise, is spiritually on a higher level than any age that went before. You cannot see spiritual evolution in the throwing of an atomic bomb. You see it in the universal horror that rose against it. You cannot see it in the existence of slavery centuries back. You see it in the heart of humanity that turned and said, "Never again." You even see it, oddly enough, in the advertising that blushes at its own excess and preaches care for home and children. These are not proofs in a laboratory. They are straws in the wind, and the wind is spirit moving through human consciousness. Somewhere along the line, grace touches each soul, and the collective, too, is being touched, awakened, led. Bring it home now. Your very hunger to pray truly, your dissatisfaction with bargaining and noise, your readiness to stand still even for 30 seconds. That is grace at work in you. You did not manufacture that hunger. It summoned you. You did not invent this longing. It is the Christ in you, calling you to recognize itself. Trust the tempo. Practice patience not as passivity, but as devotion. Retire within. Recognize presence. Rest until peace puts its hand upon your shoulder. Do this and do it again, without condemnation when you forget, and without pride when you remember. Grace is the hidden engine of transformation, and your work is the gentle labor of yielding to it. Stand ye still, and let the rhythm of God's own life carry you from glimpse to glow, from glow to day, until you no longer speak of finding peace, but peace speaks of finding you. Now let us make this very simple, because the next gust does not announce itself with a lecture. It bangs on the door. You will need not a library, but a liturgy, an inner sequence that becomes a spiritual reflex. Here it is. First, stop the pleading. Catch yourself in the very act of bargaining and say within, "No, stand ye still." Not many words, few words, then silence. Second, withdraw attention from appearances. Turn the eyes and ears away from the clock, the screen, the symptom, the rumor. Close the door of the senses. Third, enter stillness. Let the shoulders lower. Let the breath lengthen. Let the mind's wheel coast without your hand on the brake. Fourth, recognize presence. Softly now. There is a presence. It is here. It is now. Not to summon, but to notice. Fifth, rest until the inner shift comes. Wait, not on time, but on God. Wait until the drum in the chest stops recruiting you to battle and peace begins to announce itself. Obstacles will come. Expect them and do not wrestle. The mind will demand results. Is it working yet? What about tomorrow? Excuse me, but that is the storm trying to enroll you as its publicist. Return to the center. The emotions will argue, waves of fear, tides of grief. Do not dam them, do not dramatize them. Return to the center. The body will testify, sensations insisting on their own authority. Do not debate with your nerves. Return to the center. Not outlining, no planning, just recognition. If you must use words, use the few that open the door. Here God is. And then consent to the quiet. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, from hurry, from proving, from second powers. The battle is not yours, but God's. What should you look for as proof? The first demonstration is peace. Not fireworks, Not voices, not sudden headlines bending in your favor. Peace. A slackening in the chest. A soft, unargued assurance. It is well. From that peace, right action emerges without strain. A call is made, or not. A sentence is spoken, or silence holds the room. A door opens, or the need to go through dissolves. You will find that harmony arranges itself when you are no longer arranging. The Father within, He doeth the works. Do not make a marathon of it. Consistency without strain is the way. Many short returns, half a minute here, a minute there, throughout the day. In the car, at the sink, between one task and the next. Withdraw, recognize, rest. Let this become your breathing, not your Sunday sport. No heroics of willpower, no timing God with a stopwatch. Frequent, gentle, faithful. Each return is a thread. Soon there is a fabric, and that fabric will not tear when the wind rises. So when the next storm knocks, do not run to panic prayer. Enter your sanctuary. Stop the pleading. Withdraw from appearances. Be still. Recognize presence. Rest until peace takes its seat. In that realized stillness, the storm is found to have been weather in thought, and weather cannot survive the climate of God. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. Withdraw, recognize, rest, until peace reveals the unreality of the storm. Now if peace has taken its seat, and the storm has found no audience, there is one more thing, simple, solemn, and utterly free. The birth of the Christ is recognized by a voluntary act of devotion, not commanded, not performed for merit, not a bargain. It rises of itself, as surely as the wise, seeing the star, took up their gifts. They were not paying a fee to a baby. They were laying homage before the presence that baby represented. So with you and me. When realization dawns, not in sentences, but down in the region of the heart answers. It must. Something kneels, even if the knees never bend. Something offers, even if no one sees. Something yields the scepter, even if no ceremony marks the yielding. Do not confuse devotion with display. Devotion is not theater. Devotion is inner homage. It is the quiet removal of the shoes of self-will, because the ground where you stand is holy. It is the laying down of the sword of control, because the battle is not yours, but God's. It is the placing of fear itself upon the altar, not to be admired, but to be relinquished. To say within, thy will, not as a stoic vow, but as the sweet discovery that the will of God is your good already moving. Excuse me, but this is the proof that we have not merely talked about presence, we have recognized presence. The recognition asks no audience, it asks consent. And if the heart seeks a symbol, and sooner or later it will, let it be simple and unsupervised. Perhaps you light a candle at the kitchen sink, not to summon God, but to acknowledge God here. Perhaps you sit in reverent silence for 1 minute after the phone call, not planning the next call, but letting peace complete its own sentence. Perhaps you forgive the one you had armed your case against, not to be noble, but because in the presence there is no case. Perhaps you tithe, not money only, but time, attention, the first fruits of the morning, to that which lives your life. Perhaps you place a flower where no one will see it and whisper, "Thank you." Perhaps you do nothing outward at all, and something within bows. Any of these, none of these, it will be shown you. The heart knows its homage. Here's the paradox we have come to love, because it saves us from begging. You do not ask God to come, you acknowledge that God is. You do not plead for the storm to stop, you stop lending it power. In that acknowledgement, the problem loses its standing. It has no jurisdiction in the court of the real. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. From the court of second causes, from the habit of petitioning absence. Presence is presence. Realization is the verdict, and peace is its seal. So I leave you with this commissioning, gentle and exact. When the next claim rises, stand ye still. Do not run to panic prayer. Withdraw. Recognize. Rest until peace takes its seat. And when peace has borne witness, let the heart do what it will by devotion. Whatever small, secret gift it is moved to lay at the altar of the One. In that act, your own being confirms what has occurred. The Christ has been born, here, as the life of you. And then, go your way in quiet. The Father within, He doeth the works. Thank you.